Welcome to the Green Podcast. My name is Dylan Welch. I'm the CEO of green.org and Dylan Welch Media. Our goal with this podcast is to bring you the biggest names and leaders in renewable energy, clean technology, and sustainability so that you can stay up to date with the latest trends and everything that is happening in this world. Not only that, you'll get some action items for your life so that you can apply some amazing things and make your world a better place as well. Let's get the show started. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Green Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Welch, and today we have a really interesting guest, BJ Jones, the president and CEO of the Battery Park City Authority. We've talked to a lot of CEOs, a lot of scientists, but I've never talked to someone like BJ. I'm really interested to learn about all the things they have going on at Battery Park City, and just researching kind of what they're doing is really interesting because they're planning very forward thinking and ready to dive in and talk to BJ. So BJ, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dylan. Glad to talk about sustainability here in Battery Park City and beyond.
Yeah, so real quick, just for those who are not in New York City, tell us a little bit about Battery Park City, like the history of it and sort of what it's like to be there on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, Battery Park City has an interesting history. This neighborhood, it's 92 acres. It's a mixed use development. So we have residential buildings here, commercial buildings here, schools, cultural institutions, and beautiful public park spaces. But all of this has been created where dilapidated piers were crumbling into the Hudson River. And so just over 50 years ago, the Battery Park City Authority, which is a New York State public benefit corporation, was created to make this neighborhood happen, and did so by extending the shoreline, using landfill in part from the construction of the World Trade Center, and then over a period of a few decades, building the neighborhood of Battery Park City as we know it now. And so it's really become an interesting model of urban development.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. And before we started this podcast, I was just kind of telling BJ, I was just in New York City. I went to the top of the World Trade Center, and I just remember looking down over Battery Park City. And it really is an amazing place because you've got museums, parks, schools, businesses, all sort of right there on prime New York City real estate overlooking the river. It's really amazing how it's all come together. So what's sort of your day-to-day life like as the president and CEO? What kind of projects are you working on? What kind of things are you overlooking?
Yeah, we are, we're involved in a lot of different activities as part of our responsibility to not only develop but maintain the neighborhood. And so, we're part parks department. So we manage the public parks, the horticulture and the maintenance that's involved with the upkeep of those beautiful parks. We're kind of part real estate company because we're responsible for the property here and developing it, and have entered into all of these leases with the different types of buildings that you've mentioned here. We have a programming element, a lot of programs that we provide to the community to activate the neighborhood. And so it's a wide range of things that we're doing. But I would say, beyond just kind of the day-to-day taking care of the neighborhood and making sure the trash cans are emptied and taking care of the parks and what have you, is that I'm particularly focused on our responsibility to maintain Battery Park City, and through the lens of doing so as an ongoing concern, particularly in the face of climate change. And so because as I had briefly mentioned, we are literally built out into the water. We are vulnerable in a way that, the authority, didn't contemplate, until Hurricane Sandy came. And so, part of our maintenance obligations and our duty is to make sure that Battery Park City can stand the test of time. And so that's where kind of a renewed focus on sustainability and resiliency has come into play.
It's definitely one thing to, think about the looming climate change crisis. You see it in the news, and it's almost so much that like a lot of people just put it in the back of their minds, like, I have other things I got to worry about. I don't want to think about this right now, which is understandable. There's a lot going on, but like you said, I mean, you saw it up close firsthand with Hurricane Sandy. That has a direct impact, and that's kind of how I got really interested in, sustainability and climate change, is going to places where you actually see the physical impact, and
Hmm.
it does make you want to, think of solutions. And we'll kind of get into everything you're doing with sustainability and the sustainability implementation plan, but I'm curious, like, are there any specific projects or buildings or parks or museums that you've kind of got to conceptualize and watch come take life?
Yeah, I think that a lot in terms of kind of what has informed my perspective when it comes to sustainability. I think back to my days in the Bloomberg administration where I got to play a very, very tiny part in the development of Plan YC, and seeing how that's kind of taken a life of its own over the last many years now. And the city just, released a new version of it. And so I think, seeing, New York City as an exemplar in kind of setting the standard for planning from a sustainability perspective has been really important to me. And also just kind of New York State and the Hochul administration, and taking climate adaptation very seriously too, has both of those things help lay the groundwork for a community like mine, which is you know a little corner of New York City and of New York State. So there's a lot of exciting things happening across New York, as well as just right here in Battery Park City.
It's a little corner, but it's a very centralized prime place because, New York City is one of those places that does have a huge impact culturally, economically, that ripples around the world. So when, other cities start planning how they're, going to be more sustainable, they're going to look at what you're doing right now and learn from it. So I think it's important what you're doing. It's really cool. I love how you're already thinking, 6, 10, 15 years
Yeah.
down the line. And two things, I was kind of researching and learning about. The first one was the Resilience Action Plan. So,
Yeah.
can you tell me a little bit about the Resilience Action Plan and kind of what you're working on with that?
Yeah. So, kind of the first order of business when I became president about 5 years ago was to develop a strategic plan for the authority, kind of looking forward. And we didn't just call it a strategic plan; we called it a resilience action plan. We did it in partnership with 100 resilient cities. But the idea was about making sure we created a neighborhood that, like I was saying earlier, could stand the test of time and navigate the shocks and stressors that it encounters along the way. Battery Park City was not a sure thing as it was being developed, and it's had to weather, financial crises and uncertainties, terrorist attacks, hurricanes, a pandemic. Our story has been one of resilience, and I want our future to be one of resilience too. And so, we look at it through a couple of lenses. We think about, providing vibrant public spaces. We think about municipal leadership and affordability when it comes to housing. And of course, one of the key cornerstones is, resiliency and sustainability, thinking about how we can become a carbon neutral neighborhood, how we can fortify this neighborhood to provide coastal flood protection, and just be responsible stewards when it comes to, you know, uh, uh, becoming more efficient when it comes to water usage and waste reduction, and those kinds of things too.
I mean, it's important because I grew up in like quintessential 1950s suburbs, and it was good, when you're a little kid and you want to ride your bike around, but when you get older and you have to hop in your car to go grocery shopping or go to school or go to the gym, you realize if every single person is doing that, it's not very sustainable. And then I've moved to other cities and realized, how nice it is just to be able to walk down the street to your job or walk down the street to a coffee shop or a park or a gym, and I can never go back, honestly. It's
Yeah.
amazing to kind of see the difference of those places. So how has that thought process, as you're kind of planning these things and working with these different businesses on the real estate side, shaped your sustainability implementation plan? Because I'm sure they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, we're building on a pretty solid green legacy for Battery Park City. The authority developed these green guidelines for construction as it was being built, which really kind of set the standard for what eventually became LEED standards for construction. We have some of the first LEED buildings, whether it's schools or residential um, buildings or commercial buildings in the country. And the way we've cared for our parks has always had kind of an environmentally friendly and organic approach to it. But we can't rest on our laurels. The climate continues to change, and the consequences of not taking action are only getting more severe. And so, we have to continue to adjust, sadly. And so how we're doing that is, one of the ways is, looking at carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions in the neighborhood. We've developed a climate action plan to figure out whether it's in kind of with our buildings or transportation in the neighborhood and other areas, how we can reduce our carbon footprint in the neighborhood. But we're also looking at waste and how we can reduce waste, recycle more, compost more. We've been really big on composting here and expanding what we're composting. We've even delved into dog waste composting here because we are leaving no stone unturned. And we're in the middle of a big push right now to reduce waste, not just in the kind of the office spaces we control directly, but throughout our public parks, and figuring out how we can get everybody to play a part in reducing waste. So we're looking at it from a bunch of different angles.
Very cool. Yeah, I always love just learning about like the history of New York City and how much it changes from decade to decade, how much it grows. And I'm sure the people, who live around there are very happy. I'm sure the air is cleaner. I'm sure there's less waste on the ground. Have you seen just more people and businesses kind of embracing sustainability as you've started to like live in New York City, work in New York City, and work with Battery Park City Authority?
Yeah, I think in general, there's a greater understanding of why people have to take sustainability seriously and why we have to become environmentally responsible. I think it still requires behavior changes and in some cases infrastructure changes when you're like trying to electrify a building, for example. That can be very difficult, but I think that's where even these small steps are important because they help in, building momentum. Don't wait until you've figured everything out and then act. Like start chiseling away at it now, uh, and build upon that as you can. And so I think that, in the neighborhood, we see whether it's commercial entities, just residents in the neighborhood, definitely getting on board with kind of what part they can play in adapting to a changing climate and fighting the climate crisis, which is really exciting. And even just the attention we're getting for what we're doing. I'm a big believer that local action can have global impact, and so if what we do can help inform, educate, or inspire other people to take action, then I think that's just another way that what you do adds up.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. I mean, and again, being in New York City, it does have a direct impact on the way other cities, city planners, developers are going to plan in the future. From your experience, is there any sort of like tidbit of advice or something you could share of like, hey, I learned this through trial and error. Here's something that I would do if I was going to do it all over again. Like, what are some things you could share for the other people out there who might be following in your footsteps?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is that, even if you plan with the best of intentions and develop with the best of intentions, the environment, can change in ways that you don't anticipate. And so I think it was a real wake-up call, for us, that even though, we were a green neighborhood and ahead of the curve, that we still have work to do. And so you just have to keep, your eye on the ball and be prepared to continue adjusting. I think that's lesson number one. I think the other, lesson is to really, don't be afraid to try, whether, composting is still, not a habit for many people. And so, trying to expand that in the neighborhood has been a great project for us, and we've made great progress. But I think, again, getting on people on board with these changes that can sound good maybe, but be uncomfortable, at first, are important to do. Getting people to engage in our dog waste composting program. Now the dog owners in our dog runs, they're getting on board and figuring out how, they and their dogs can play a role too. But that's different. We weren't talking about that even just a couple of years ago. And, I think also working with these building owners to help figure out whether it's through energy audits or retrofits, or figuring out through solar or wind, how they can make their buildings more efficient. Having those conversations are all it's hard to figure out what you're supposed to do and how to do it. But I think that it's really important to try, and you get traction before you know it, and that makes the next step easier. And that's why it's so important to just keep moving in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's what's so fascinating about the sustainable industry and renewable energy and clean technology. I mean, if you look back on how it was 20 years ago to how it is now, it's completely different. A lot of people,
Yeah.
couldn't even have predicted where we're at today. And then you have the task of sort of planning for, 10, 15, 20 years out. And I'm sure that's a huge challenge of trying to get people to think that far ahead. And they're maybe skeptical, and you're like, no, no, like that's just step one. We're already looking at like step 5. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's, yeah, again, it comes through trial and error, but being open to adapting to those things. And if it wasn't for, early adapters, we wouldn't be able to further along that technology just by supporting the businesses that are working on it, because they're learning through trial and error too. And then, the next big city that wants to do something similar, they can look at Battery Park City as an example. So I'm sure it's a very tough, crazy job, because you're kind of thinking like past, present, future all at once and sort of implementing it all
Yeah.
together. It must be a fun challenge that you're working on.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a great, experience, coming up with these projects. And it's not me coming up with these projects. We have a team that's very invested in a sustainable future here. And so there's a lot of great ideas that we're cooking up across the organization. And so it's a real privilege to be able to see the opportunities there and try to help clear a path for them to happen. And then hopefully getting more and more stakeholders on board throughout our community and beyond. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, what projects do you have coming up on the horizon? Are you thinking, already like 20, 30 years out, or you kind of think, I mean, I'm sure you must have to a little bit, but what are you kind of trying to implement within the next 5 years, 10 years, and even beyond that?
Yeah. Well, we're really focused, you know, on coastal flood protection right now. It's, I kind of characterize it as we have to play, offense and defense. And so with the coastal flood protection, we're playing defense in the face of climate change. Storms are clearly getting worse and they're getting more frequent. And so we can't wait. We have to protect the neighborhood. And so we are, we've been embarking on a number of resiliency measures to protect the neighborhood. Finished one at our ball fields last year. Construction is underway in the southern perimeter of Battery Park City, and we have design underway for the north and western portions. And all of this is going to lock in as part of the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency Initiative. And so we're working closely with the city on that. So that's a big focus. But then in terms of, offense, one of the things that we've been looking at internally pretty closely is assessing kind of district energy solutions for the neighborhood and how we might be able to take advantage of infrastructure changes that would facilitate tapping into renewable energy in the neighborhood. And that could be some kind of system that we develop for the neighborhood, or facilitating specific improvements at each of the buildings in Battery Park City, but doing it collectively so we get the bang for our buck. I mean, both in terms of not just economically, but really making a dent in our carbon footprint. So I'm excited about that, as well as we're doing a lot with regards to biodiversity. We put our first beehive in place recently. We're replacing pavers throughout our park with permeable pavers. I had mentioned our recycling efforts. We have this zero waste push. We got our one of our facilities certified as zero waste. We're trying to do that now for all of our parks and public spaces. And so, there's a lot going on, both kind of long-term planning, big projects, but also some smaller, more tangible projects too, all with an eye of trying to do our part in the face of a changing climate, because unfortunately we keep hearing the message from scientists that the window is closing on the opportunity to really make a difference. And so we can't just plan, we also have to act. And so we're trying to do both.
Exactly. And I appreciate that. That's important to think far down the line, but also making those little day-to-day changes, because those ultimately add up. First off, BJ, I know you're a busy guy. I want to thank you for being here. I want to be respectful of your time. It's been amazing chatting with you. I can't wait to get back to New York City soon. Come visit Battery Park City,
Great.
Hang out for the day. As we wrap up, I've got one more question. Is there anything that, the green.org audience can do to support Battery Park City in any way?
Yeah, I would say, visit our website, bpca.ny.gov, particularly our resiliency and sustainability pages, where we, with great intention, we post as much information as we can about what we're doing and what our plans are. We want our community to be aware of what we're doing, but we also want people to learn from what we're doing too. All of the lessons, good and bad, and engage with us in this, conversation about how we can work together to make a dent in the fight against climate change.
Yeah, BJ, thank you again. Seriously, you're paving the way for a lot of amazing things for years to come. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank your team for helping coordinate all of this. I also want to thank our listeners, our followers, our subscribers, everyone who supports green.org. Our goal is to bring you leaders in renewable energy, clean tech, sustainability, share what's happening in the world, give you some fun, interesting content to listen to, and hopefully apply some changes to your life. Really appreciate you being here. And BJ, again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dylan. Thanks very much.
Appreciate you listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Green Podcast. Talk to you soon. Thank you so much for tuning into the episode. My name is Dylan Welch. Appreciate it. As always, stay up to date with the latest information on green.org and dylanwelch.com. Dylan Welch Media is a full-service media and communications agency dedicated to promoting, marketing, and helping businesses in clean tech, renewable energy, and sustainability grow, get more clients, get more customers, get in front of their ideal clientele. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. If you're interested in joining the Green Summit, go to www.green-summit.org. Reserve your ticket today. There's very few spots left, so make sure you get on that ASAP. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.